And today we are going to be talking about why Schutzhund clubs, IGP, for those of you that are unaware, Schutzhund and IGP, it's the same thing, why IGP clubs suck. Now, for the purposes of this discussion, we are going to be speaking about North American IGP specifically, Canada and the United States, as these are clubs that I have firsthand experience with, and the culture across Canada and the United States in Schutzhund clubs in general is quite similar. And this is something that is near and dear to my heart, just because obviously I love the sport. And as you guys know, I invest quite a bit of time, effort, money, and content into the sport. For what reason, I still don't know. I guess I like just competing. There's definitely no money in it. But all that being said, we're gonna talk. We're gonna talk about this. We're gonna really put it out there and say the things that I don't think people like saying or people won't admit. And we're gonna talk about why these clubs suck now and what problem and what a big problem this is for the sport in general. So I'll just let some people jump on here and we'll get started. Hello, hello. How's it going, everybody? I hope you guys are having a fantastic Friday night. Man, it's been a crazy last couple days. People getting shot, all sorts of wild stuff. Thank you, thank you. Linda says, we have no good IGP training in GA. You're speaking about Georgia? Yes, you do. There is one man in Georgia that I know of that I would recommend that knows his business, and that would be Stefan Schaub at Von der Staatsmacht. All right, guys. I think there's enough people on. Ibrahim says, hey, I remember you from the homeless and rehab shelter. Glad to see you're doing good now. Glad we helped. Oh, bro, you are funny. But you know, it's funny because at first I thought you were being serious because I used to work in shelter support and housing for the city of Toronto. So I thought you were actually talking about my former job. Thank God I've actually never been in a homeless shelter or rehab shelter. It's not an experience that I've ever had from the, let's say, service receiving standpoint. Thank God, and that's a privilege. We have to acknowledge our blessings as they come. But you are funny. All right, guys. So let's talk about why Schutzhund clubs suck. And it's a big problem. And now here's why it's a big problem. Schutzhund clubs are the bedrock. Well, I wouldn't say they're the bedrock of IGP, but they're a necessity for IGP, right? So here in North America, again, I'm not going to speak to Europe. I'm sure it's a completely different situation there. My understanding is the culture there is way different. But for those of you that don't know, people that engage in the sport of IGP or Schutzhund, as it was formerly known, both generally used to belong to clubs, right? They would belong to dog clubs. And the clubs would be location specific. So, like, hypothetically, Toronto Schutzhund Club, which was a thing back in the day, right? And they have a field and they have, some equipment, so on and so forth. They generally have a helper, a training director, and, a core group of members. And you would pay a yearly membership fee to be a member of that club. And you would go there and train usually twice a week, right? And that was the traditional way and is the traditional way that the sport of IGP Schutzhund was practiced. However, there has been a recent shift that I think in general IGP organizations like the GSSCC, the German Shepherd Schutzhund Club of Canada, the USCA, the United States Schutzhund Association or something like that, right? They have not yet dealt with what has happened. And what has happened is a lot of the younger generation are saying no to clubs. They're saying, no, thank you. I don't want to be a part of it. It sucks, right? And it's a big problem because they still want to do the dog sport, right? But they don't want to be a member of the club. So we're going to kind of get into why clubs suck now, maybe some ideas for what clubs can do in order to not suck anymore. And then maybe what the sport in North America needs to do moving forward to fix this huge problem that it has. So typically people, if they're kind of in the younger generation of IGP practitioners, and also some older folks now at this point, they won't go to clubs anymore. They join private training groups, and they will go to private training groups that they'll meet once a week or even once every other week, and then they'll just kind of work on their own or just in pairs or trios, so on and so forth. And they'll just kind of get together every couple weeks, and they'll actually pay quite a bit of money to go to these private training groups and train with a professional trainer such as myself, right? Where they would get the expert, coaching of that trainer, the expert helper work, all of that type of stuff that you need in order to be successful in dog sport. And why this has happened is, well, I've already said the club structure sucks, but we're going to talk now about the details of why it sucks and maybe some things that we can do to fix it, because it's not enough to just say this sucks. It's also important to say, to not only identify the problem, but maybe suggest some solutions. So number one, okay, it sucks because you've got a lot of, let's say, the old guard, the people that have been doing IGP Schutzhund for 30, 40, in some cases 50 years in those clubs. And not all of them, but a lot of them. They're kind of occupied by those types of folks. The problem with that is not that there's inherently something wrong with people that are elderly. It's that they tend to have a very narrow view of training, and their training tends to be extremely outdated, and it's not fun. It's not fun for the dogs. It's not fun for the handlers. And progress is often very poor in the sense that it takes like 3 years for people to get a fucking BH, right? That's unacceptable. People scrape barely, maybe by the time the dog's 5 years old, they'll scrape through an IGP3 at a club trial. And anybody that has any aspirations of real success, whether it's on the regional, national, or world level, is without hope in about, I would say, 95 to maybe even 98% of clubs across North America. And that's because the standard of training is so low. So that's number one. We have a standards problem in training. Now, the other problem is that a lot of these clubs kind of run under this authoritarian, it's like an authoritarian dictatorship. There's the training director, and it's God and then the training director, right? That's kind of like how it works. And if they catch you ever going to a seminar that you're not allowed to go to, or training with this person or that person, you are, to be shunned and stigmatized, and you're so terrible and blah blah blah. Or you can only, you can only train with us, and you must follow all our rules and stuff. But the problem with that, I have actually no problem with people being authoritarian in their training approach, especially when dealing with people that maybe don't have as much experience or as much success as them. The problem is the people that are being authoritarian do not have the requisite success to demand that level of obedience, let's say, right? So you've got some young person that comes into the sport, maybe, and by young, I mean like in their 30s, right? So some young person that comes into the sport and says like, okay, like I aspire, I want to compete, I aspire to maybe win a national or to go on the world team. And then they have to listen to, Mr., 70-year-old dude that his dog walks next to him like it gets beaten with a 2x4 on a daily basis, and he can barely scrape a pass on a home field on a good day, but yet he's the training director, and we all must listen to him because 25 years ago he once made the world team in like 1998. You know what I mean? When this is the kind of thing that you will commonly see, right? And well, back in my day, the dogs. It's like, bro, shut up. Nobody cares, right? Your training sucks. Your dog looks like, you kick the crap out of it on a daily basis. Why are you telling people how to do anything, right? You need to get with the times. So let me be very clear. I am not stating that everybody that's old in dog sport is like this. I'm just stating that there's a lot of people in dog sport that are like that, right? And believe it or not, you will actually find people that are younger, right? Like 30s, 40s even, that are running some clubs, and they kind of do the same thing. They have like this very authoritarian approach, but they don't have the success on the field that would justify that authoritarian approach. And so it just turns a lot of people off because it's like, yeah, I got to obey you and follow all your rules in order to be part of this club, but there's no upside. Like, I'm not even going to, like, it's not like you're an expert. It's not like you can't get me past where you are. You and your dog kind of suck at this thing that you've been doing for 30 years. what possible chance would I have of being successful working with you? And that describes about 95% of dog clubs in IGP, and sorry, in North America, right? And that's the sad truth, right? And again, I've met a lot of these people. They're nice people outside of that atmosphere, but when they're in that kind of training director position, they can be very difficult to deal with. The other thing that you have with clubs, and you see this increasingly more and more and more, is a lot of clubs have a helper problem. Okay, and by a helper problem, it means, I mean, their helper does not know what they're doing. The helper, for those of you that don't do IGP, is the decoy, right? The helper does not know what they're doing because they were taught by someone who didn't really know what they were doing, who was in turn taught by someone who didn't really know what they were doing. And it's just this long line of incompetence that has been passed down now to, whatever young guy they saddled with a stick in a sleeve, and now he's a helper. And, you got to listen to his expert advice when he's training the dog, right? Training, I put in quotation. So that's a huge problem, right? Both from a training director standpoint and a helper, there's a significant lack of expert helper work, okay? Number two, there's number three, time investment. When you belong to a Schutzhund club, okay, you're there all day, okay? Now, I don't know about you guys. When I worked, like when I had a job outside of dogs, as I referenced earlier in this live stream, I worked nights, right? Like I actually didn't have time to be hanging out at a club all day, every day. Now, if I was a retiree or something, which obviously a lot of people in IGP are, then for sure you can hang out for 2 days, on the weekday evening, you can spend, anywhere from 5 to 10 p.m. out there, 5 hours. And then on the weekend, God, man, you're there from like, maybe 9 a.m. all the way to like 5, 6 p.m., right? It's a long freaking day. Now, I don't have time for that. And I don't even all I do is dogs, and I still don't have time to do that kind of nonsense, nor would I want to, right? That's exhausting. But, in a dog club, because there's generally so many people, you are going to be waiting that long to go up and to run your dog, right? So for the potential of maybe 2 15-minute sessions of questionable quality, you are now going to sacrifice your entire day on a weekend, right? Again, this is hard to sell to people that are younger, especially again when the environment is not one of expertise and competence. It's an authoritarian environment filled with ineptitude and mediocrity at best. So now I have to go and be there all day and do that, right? And then also the volunteer stuff that the clubs have to do, so on and so forth. So so we have training issues like the training director generally, the training director issues. We have helper issues, and then we have time investment issues. Okay, so these now we'll talk about culture. Culture is the next thing. So the culture of most clubs. IGP is a very time intensive sport. It is more time intensive than any other dog sport out there because you have three phases. You've got the tracking phase, you've got the obedience phase, you've got the protection phase. And this requires an enormous time investment, even if you have just one dog. And even if your goal is only, let's say, I mean, it's not as bad if your goal is to scrape through a title. But if your goal is to compete at any kind of significant level, just remember, your competition is out there working. And if you let them outwork you, there's a pretty good chance you're going to be left holding the bag on the big day. So, there's a significant time investment involved. I was joking with my friend Ann Lee very recently that it's like a part-time job, training for the high level in IGP. Like we're always driving somewhere, we're always laying tracks, we're always setting up field equipment, taking it down, running our dogs, planning trainings, all of these things that are involved in performing at that high level. And what we have to accept is that there are a lot of people that get involved in IGP with the aspiration of performing at that high level. And in order for them to accomplish that, there needs to be a culture of that in the club. So I already kind of spoke to this culture of mediocrity that you see in a lot of dog clubs, both in the quality of the dogs and in the quality of the training. But that being said, the culture in a lot of these clubs is very cliquish. right? And cliquish not in like a productive sense. Like I have no problem with people clicking up. I think people clicking up and kind of getting together with like-minded people is generally a good thing. You can't force everyone to get along. There's this kind of asinine perception that a lot of people have that, oh, like everybody just has to get along. And the problem with IGP is that not everybody gets along. And that's why, sports like PSA are growing. No, sports like PSA are growing, because they're offering more than just a club atmosphere. In fact, in PSA, there's a lot of training groups that are private training groups, just as there are in IGP, right? But that being said, with IGP, a lot of these clubs kind of have a very stale culture. It's boring. It's boring to hang out there. It's not fun. Again, I say a lot because I know there's going to be people all up in arms about how awesome it is to hang out at their club, and that's great. That's great if it's good for you that your club is like that. But in many cases, it is kind of stale. It's kind of boring. And again, there's that culture of just kind of like mediocrity and very slow progress. And that, again, for a lot of people, it's not a rewarding thing. Then you mix in, the gossip and the he said, she said nonsense, the politics and all that kind of stuff. And it can become downright unpleasant for a lot of people. Listen, this is coming from a guy that, let's just say, I've been kicked out of more clubs than I left peacefully. We'll put it that way, right? So, I'm well aware of like the culture issues that can occur, the jealousies and all these types of things, all the negativity, right? And that's the problem with clubs, is they're not selective enough, right? And although a lot of people are going to be like, oh, like, remember what I said, everyone's going to be like more like, oh, like everyone needs to get along. But I disagree. Everybody cannot get along. It is fundamentally impossible, right? So what we need to do is actually encourage people to find their people, right? Encourage people to find their people. So if you're a Schutzhund club and you want to have a certain vibe, let's say your vibe is winning. We want to have banger dogs. We want to have banger training. We want to win, right? The people that have that mindset should be able to all get together and establish a club, right? Call it the winner club, whatever you want. And then filter their membership according to that criteria and say, okay, like if you want to be with us, this is your mentality, right? Maybe you have another club where it's more like, hey, we all just want to have fun, drink and barbecue and just like train our dogs twice a week and just enjoy one another's company. We'll call that the hangout club, right? And so they should be able to say, hey, like you've got like way too many aspirations to be a member of our club. Like we just want to chill, all right? We want to have a good time and, not do too much. And that's the vibe of our club, right? So I have no problem actually with clubs being very selective and pushing people out that they don't think are going to go with the vibe of the club. But now that's why we have so many training groups popping up, right? Where people are kind of trying to find like-minded individuals that they enjoy training with. Because at the end of the day, this is a hobby, right? This is a hobby, and everyone should be free to, associate with who they want and not associate with who they don't want. Now, here is the problem. This is the big fundamental problem. IGP clubs throw all of the events that are necessary for the sport of IGP to exist. So for instance, at the national championship that I just won, that was hosted by the Saskatoon Schutzhund Club, right? And I've never met them up until this point. They were very nice to me when I was there, very accommodating, and they threw a fantastic national event, right? Like, they put in that work. They had their volunteers. Yes, they got money from the GSSCC and the entry fees, so on and so forth. I don't know really what that account amounts to. I'm sure they didn't make tons of money off of it, if they made any. But needless to say, you need clubs to hold trials. Without clubs, there are no trials. There are no championships, right? And that's a problem. So on one side, we have clubs that have generally this culture of sucking. And then on the other side, we need the clubs, right? So now, what is the solution? Now, a lot of people would say, okay, we just need to force everybody. If you want to be involved in IGP, you have to be a member of a club. And that would be kind of the stupid approach, because if you made that a mandate where people had to be a member of a club, what would happen is you would have a great exodus of people from IGP, specifically in your younger generation, right? And you would basically kill the grassroots of the sport, right? So that would be a problem. So, what are some other solutions that we can utilize to make clubs better? Well, number one, I don't believe in, like, again, I don't believe in forcing people. So, I said, okay, training, the quality of training is an issue, right? How could clubs fix that? Well, they could bring in, professionals in this dog sport, professional competitors that have a track record of success at a high level. They could bring them in on a regular basis, run seminars with them, and then maybe try to model their outdated training now after this person that has success in most recent times. That would be kind of like a common sense thing, but a lot of clubs don't do that because you have kind of insecure, authoritarian, tin pot dictators in charge of them that are in love with their own ideas, even though those ideas have not manifested any actual success on the field. But that goes without saying, right? But that would be the common sense thing. Then that would be my advice to any Schutzhund club out here that is watching this live, and I'm sure some of you will see it. Bring help in ASAP. Stop doing all the dumb shit you're doing. It sucks. The dogs suck. It's not an accident. It's no one else's fault but yours. Bring in help and throw everything out that you're doing. It's all probably trash. It's all garbage, right? Throw it all out. It doesn't make sense. And I'm saying this to be shocking, but I'm also saying it because it's the truth. Because I'll tell you, every time I go to a Schutzhund club, like, I don't care where it is, like, me and my friends that train together, right? We'll sit there and we'll just watch this shit, and we'll be like, "What are you guys doing?" It is like trying to watch someone, I don't know, draw a picture with a blindfold on using their feet instead of their hands. And that's like kind of like how it looks like that to me when they're training the dog. And it's like, bro, what did the dog get out of this? What did you get out of this? It's just a shit show from beginning to end. None of it made any sense. And lo and behold, oh, he failed. It's like, you guys need to stop that nonsense. You guys need help. Get help. Get the membership to pay. Hey guys, like, we're gonna bring in so and so, who has a track record of success and has an actual training system that makes sense that we can follow. We're gonna bring them in every quarter. You guys are all gonna pony up for it because it's good for all of us, and we're gonna at least improve the base level of our training. Right? Again, you don't have to have the aspiration to win, but there's no excuse for doing something for 30 years and sucking at it that much. And I see way too much of that in IGP. Again, I'm speaking about North America. I don't know anything about the European club situation. I would guess it's kind of the same. I'll talk a little bit about what I've heard about some European clubs and the culture that they have, and maybe that'll give maybe some North American clubs an idea. But that's my advice to you guys who are in clubs and who do want to improve the experience. The other thing that I would do is I would ensure, and I know some clubs run this model, you have primary members who pay a rate, and then you have associate members, right? Associate members do not have the full membership privileges of the club, but they are able to come out however many times that you guys have determined that they're able to come out and train. And associate membership is good because, again, it keeps people in the fold of the Schutzhund Club without maybe giving them all the privileges, but also responsibilities associated with being a full member of a club, right? So in my opinion, associate members should actually pay more because I assume they're not going to be there for as much to do the volunteering, so on and so forth, right? You make them pay a little more, but they get access to the club field, they get access to the trials, so on and so forth. So that's another idea. But here's the biggest one. Here's my big thing that I would strongly suggest to all the organizations watching this. Because again, this isn't just a slam fest. This is generally like my advice to you. The problem that a lot of private training groups have and why they can't become official clubs is because they are unable to throw trials. They don't have the land to throw the trial. They don't have the tracking to throw the trial. Maybe they don't have the finances to bring in a judge, so on and so forth. So what you should do is you should offer two types of club memberships and make it mandatory. All right. Actually, I would offer 3 memberships, and I would make it mandatory if you want to trial to have one of these 3 memberships. Membership number one, your traditional IGP Schutzhund Club. They pay, let's say they're paying $100. Let's say they're paying $100 a year. Keep it at $100 a year. Then you should also offer a private training group membership, right? So the private training groups, let's say like my training group, like Team Full Power, okay? We're a private training group. Say, listen, we are willing to sanction you as a private training group. It means you don't have to throw trials, but we are willing to sanction you. All that being said, you do have to pay us a membership fee, and it's going to be more than the regular club. So let's say the regular club was $100. You're going to pay us $200 a year, right? Your members are still going to register as being members of Team Full Power, but they're going to be allowed to trial in the GSSCC or the USCA, right? And as long as they are an official member of the private training group, right? And then the third one, for those people that don't have a private training group, that don't have a traditional Schutzhund Club membership, the third one should be individual membership. And this one should be even more, right? Okay, you're not a member of a training group. You're not a member of a, traditional Schutzhund Club. You're a lone wolf. All right, you're going to pay, let's say, $250 a year. All right, you're allowed to trial, but you have an individual membership at the USCA, GSSCC, whatever, right? So now that way you've brought in all the money from everybody into the organization, right? And you've promoted the fact that people should be a member of a club, whether it is a traditional Schutzhund Club or a private training group. You've incentivized the traditional Schutzhund clubs by keeping their, let's say, yearly membership lower, but you've also brought all those private training groups, those people that kind of don't really belong anywhere, you've brought them into the fold, and you're bringing their money in so that you can then give money to the traditional clubs that are actually going to the effort of throwing the trials, right? And your organization now is bringing in more money. It's incentivizing membership, right? And you're still incentivizing the traditional clubs to throw trials, right? Because you're able to support them more financially for nationals, for championships, and maybe even for club trials. That's something you could look at. Now, that's just an idea, and I know it would work because, hey, I have some level of success in business, so kind of know how these things work. That would certainly be a fantastic idea. And it's funny, this would cost me more money than I pay now, right? Obviously. Right now, all I have to pay is my GSSCC membership. That's all I pay, right? I don't pay club fees or any of that kind of stuff. This would actually make me have to pay more in, but I'd be willing to do that for the betterment of the sport in general. Now let's talk about another thing. All right. The leadership, I find, whether it's of the clubs or the organizations, is riddled with people that don't have any kind of, what's a nice way of saying this? Don't have any kind of success as a handler, right? Like in many cases, they haven't even titled a dog. And yet they're in these like high up positions. And it's kind of like, someone being in charge of, I don't know, soccer, let's say, but they've never even played a game of soccer. It just doesn't really make sense. How can that person like identify with the people that actually do the sport that they're kind of administering, right? How can they really like understand the needs, the wants, the emotions, what's right, what's wrong in that sport if they've never really been in that position? And there's way too many of this going on, right? Like you have a problem. It's like I think we need to somewhat professionalize the leadership both of the dog clubs and of the national clubs in general. I'm not saying that they're all lacking in that experience. It's certainly not the case. There are some people in those organizations that do have that level of experience, but it is a big fundamental problem. And I think it's why you see a lot of these things going on where you'll see competitors that like myself who compete and you're like, why in God's name are you guys doing this? It makes absolutely no sense and it's not helping the sport. But they come up with like these crazy ideas or these silly ideas that actually are only negatively impacting the sport and the competition. But it's because they just don't have that perspective because they just don't do the sport. right? But they're attracted to the administrative roles for whatever reason. So that's something that I think, unfortunately, we must speak honestly about. So I think offering the private training group option and bringing that into the fold of the national club, the GSSCC, the USCA, would really open the door for a lot of people to say, I can't find a club. Well, yeah, you can. There's this private training group. It's an hour away. You can go and pay them their fee and try to get in there and see if it works for you, right? I don't know, where am I? Did I get lost? Yeah, as to fixing the culture, look, if you are a dog club and you are serious about bringing more people in, not just, oh, screw you, has, you don't know, blah, blah, blah. All right. But let's say you're actually serious. Like I want, you know what? Our membership is stagnant. We're not doing well. How do we bring more people in? All right. Well, number one, here's an idea. Not everybody's going to get along. But like I said, feel free to filter for the type of people that you want. But number two, maybe have two distinct groups within your club, right? Think about it this way, like in car racing, for instance, okay? Like think about Ford as a company, all right? Ford, for instance, has the regular products, like the regular division, right? Like they make the F-150s, the Ford Focuses, all that type of stuff. They sell them all to dealerships. But then they have, their racing division. They have their competitive division, completely separate, right? They do completely different things. They're at the cutting edge. They're competing at the highest level. They're not dealing with the F-150s and the Ford Focuses. So there's two separate divisions within the same group, right? I think a lot of dog clubs should do the same. You should have a competitive group that trains at your club, and then you should have the hobbyist, the people that want to just hang out, the people that want to just give their dog a bite once a week and play with a ball on the field every so often, right? That's totally fine. But you should have a competitive group, and then you should have the hang around type of group. And what you'll find is the competitive group, the ideas, the innovations, and the expertise that your competitive group develops through their process of competing will bleed into the regular group, so to speak, right? It won't be 100%, but it will bleed into there. And you'll have now those role models, maybe not role models, maybe that's a poor word, but you'll have that kind of ideal level. Like this is the ideal. Like these people with their dogs, they're at the high level. They're pushing for those championships. They're fighting for those championships. And the regular club members, if they choose, can then aspire to be at that level, right? Have two distinct groups within the same club. They do this in Europe, right? My understanding is they do this in Europe, not in all the clubs, but in a lot of the clubs, where they have two distinct groups within the same club. Maybe even three, right? Maybe you have like a junior members where it's like the young maybe teenagers or whatever, and they're just kind of like learning, and then you have like the established group, and then you have the racing division, so to speak, the competitive division. And then here's where the innovation happens. Your competitive division, now they go to the championship. None of their dogs out. All of their dogs maybe fail tracking, right? There's a problem. Well, now that is a clarion call to them and to the club in general that, hey, there's something wrong with our training, right? We went to the top level, or the top level for us, whatever it is, and we got our asses kicked. Now it's time to come back, retool, reorient, maybe seek some professional help and figure out this problem, re-engineer our training, and then go back out there again. And that constant innovation that's forced by being repeatedly exposed to competition will always sharpen the training, sharpen the dogs, sharpen the system, so on and so forth. And then they can then pass that on to the regular members in the club, right? And of course, you must incentivize those types of people to want to be in your club. Like when you have top level competitors that want to be in your club, right? You should probably incentivize them because they're bringing something to the dynamic that, the dude with the German Shepherd that, is afraid of his own shadow, but he's maybe nice to hang out with, and he comes out and he's never really going to do anything. He'd be lucky if he even gets an IGP1, right? He might be a nice guy, but he isn't going to bring the same things to the team as that, that person that really wants to win and that has the dog to win and that has the training approach, the mindset, and the work ethic to win, right? Those aren't the same people. They're going to bring different things to the atmosphere. So anyways, just some ideas some thoughts when it comes to IGP, some ways to bring more money into the organization, though some ways to bring more of a membership. Maybe also making it easier for clubs to certify as members, right? There's a lot of kind of different ways to skin the cat. But if you want people to come also to your championships, right? I've been to a lot of championships where it's like everybody who does the dog sports at the championship, but there's no one else at the championship. It's like, why? Buddy, you've got like a community here that like rent a bouncy castle, have someone who's in your club that maybe has a few puppies, bring those out, encourage a food truck to come out, put a bulletin out to the community. Hey, this is going to be an open house. Set it up for like obviously during obedience protection. Maybe have someone on the loudspeaker doing like some play-by-play or something. And all of a sudden you've got an event that the community can then come. They can engage. They can see maybe some puppies. Their kids can jump in the bouncy castle. You're selling some dog toys. You've got the food. Maybe you invite the local treat maker or whatever, and you can turn like my freaking duck diving events like that I hold here at Shield Canine have more interest and action than a lot of IGP trials that I've been to, and that's the sad reality, right? It's like, come on, guys, like who's throwing these events? They're putting all this work in for nobody to show up, right? Other than like all the other people that are already involved in the sport. It just makes absolutely no sense. And then I'll end with this: the social media that a lot of clubs have is like, if you're not on social media in this day and age, you don't exist, right? You're training dogs on a regular basis. I assume you're doing something that you're somewhat proud of. Otherwise, why the heck are you doing it, right? You think it's cool, whatever. Have an active social media so people can find you, so that next generation of people can find you. And guys, you guys don't know, I really want to make IGP great again, right? Like, and I say that obviously tongue in cheek, knowing all the rage bait of saying make something great again, but I mean it with all my heart, because IGP is, unfortunately, there's a lot of people that, let's say, have run it into the ground because they don't understand how to make something fun, how to make something cool. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of people that watch my stuff. They watch how I train. They watch how my group, interacts with each other. And they say, God damn, this sport actually looks fun. You know how many people I've converted from PSA? I've converted quite a few people from PSA, right? Because they go to that sport and they're like, they come and hang out with us and they see our training. They see our dogs. They see like the atmosphere and they're like, wow, like this is, I always thought IGP was like this kind of like sleepy thing that like old people did. He's like, this is full power. Like the name full power, it exists for a reason. It's because that's how we train, right? We train full power, the dogs full power, the atmosphere full power. It's not for the way that we do it anyways, right? It's not for the, let's say, faint of heart, right? But if for those people that want that experience, that's what we offer. And there's other clubs, I'm sure, that'll offer a much more kind of tame, experience. And that's totally fine. So I wanna end my kind of spiel on the clubs by saying this. I've been to a lot of dog clubs. In many cases, people were friendly. In some cases, they were not. But in many cases, people were friendly and they were welcoming and they were open. And I appreciate that. Doesn't mean that watching the training didn't kind of like make sense, like a lot of the things that I was seeing. Doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of room for improvement. But until we acknowledge what sucks, there's no chance of fixing it. And I think IGP has a big problem with that. And I think it's quite frankly, it's a generational issue, right? Like you've got people that, like I said, they have the time to put in, but maybe they don't have the requisite experience to make the thing what it should be. So my advice is, if you guys, get some professional help. Get some professional help. I think it'll make it a lot better. All right, guys, I've babbled on long enough. And those are just some of my ideas. Grassroots Canine says, why does Lucas do PSA instead of IGP? Is it because he's feminine? Yes, he's trying to get more in touch with his inner woman because he really wants to attend your, what is it, your woman's only training, is it ladies only training seminar? And he's sad that he's not allowed to go. So That's why he's doing PSA, and he'll continue to do it until you let him in. So my advice is, for the love of God, just let him come this time around. I think I'm gonna turn Lucas when that black dog of his finally passes into the next life. I think he's gonna come to IGP. Josh says, to the worlds and beyond. Indeed, sir, to the worlds and beyond. Melanie says, South Florida in the house. I love South Florida. I love me some South Florida. Grits and Grin Terriers and Lurcher says, do clubs suck because of the personality of the people? Just a lot of hotshots. No, there's not enough hotshots. That's the problem, right? There's not enough hotshots. Or there's people that think they're hotshots, but, you know, their dog says something different, right? That's the big problem. And it kind of like, again, it kind of degenerates the experience for everybody, right? Am I interested in business partnership? This is from Net Cloud Consulting. Yeah, I'm definitely interested in whatever scheme you're peddling. DJ Burkett says, hey, Has, love your lives. Don't catch them often and listen to the videos at work a lot. That's a good use of your work time. Clubs suck, man. I've recently found a coach and have a much clearer now. I'm showing for my PDC in October. Well, good luck, sir. 10 Jesse 101 says, Has, my 3 Australian kettle dogs bark when I leave for work. Neighbors say they bark nonstop. Help. Sir, I would like, wait, you said, so I put bark collars on. Well, what's wrong with your bark collars? They're clearly not working. Maybe get a better bark collar. Dogtra YS300 works like a charm. If you have multiple dogs, they can set the Dogtra YS300 off. So I would suggest the Sport Dog Deluxe bark collars. And if necessary, crate all 3 of them while you're gone, or put them in kennels. Would I call my line of work blue collar or white collar? I don't know. Like both of those things, kind of like blue collar would mean that I work with my hands for a living, I guess. But it's like, would you say like someone that is a professional horse trainer, are they blue collar or white collar? I don't think these types of things fall within that traditional role, you know. If I wanted to be, I love it. You know, people always ask me like, "Oh, like what do you do for a living?" I always say, "Oh, I'm just a dog trainer." Right? And then they're like, "Oh, bro," and you know, like they think like I work at like fucking PetSmart making like $12 an hour, right? And I let them think it, man. It's like fine, you know. It's always like it's always entertaining. Like, you know, if I wanted to be high on myself, I don't know, maybe I'd say like I'm an entrepreneur or something, right? Like, whatever. Can you comment on the joint investigation into you by the FBI and the DEA for trafficking narcotics? I don't care what Jose said. I was not involved in any of that stuff. Christina says, hi, folks. Nice haircut, Has. Thank you, Christina. We've started our working line German Shepherd, Ozzy, on the online courses. So happy with the progress, especially his reactivity. Great system. Can't thank you enough. Well, I appreciate that feedback, and I wish you great success with Ozzy. DJ Burkett says, my experience with the club as a decoy was I helped a lot of other people's dogs, but mine were often on the back burner, not progressing. Yes, and that is a problem, right? Where you'll have like one helper in the club, and if he's half decent, they'll usually like work him to death, right? And then there's no one to work his dogs, and his dogs are an afterthought because he has to go and work everybody else's dogs, often for free. And listen, if you're a young helper and you don't really know what you're doing, you should be happy for the opportunity. But if you have any, this is what happens, right? Helpers, competitors, they achieve a level of success where they're like, well, I really kind of know what I'm doing. I've invested like a decade into this. I've given of my time, my money to improve myself and my ability. You know, I have a talent. Why am I doing this and not receiving any kind of compensation? And then the helper says, screw you to the club, leaves and starts their own private training group or joins a private training group and, you know, receives a better treatment. So again, that's something that these clubs need to think about. Someone, Josh says, clubs can suck because of their inefficient use of everyone's time and the cliques within the club. Exactly, which is why I advocate for 2 separate groups, and I advocate for more professional training directors that are keeping things moving and that are making sure that there's quality reps happening on the field. Let's see here. Someone said, hips don't lie. What is that, Shakira line? To show working show line distinction. Well, working, it has nothing to do with the hips. This is a common misconception. People always talk about the hips and the slope back and this and that. And the angle. For sure, there's difference in the body structure, but it really actually doesn't mean that one dog is going to fail the hips while the other one passes. The main issue between the two is the show line dog is made to have this like beautiful extended gait as it trots around a ring in a circle. They're usually kind of like these long, narrow dogs this day and age. I don't see a lot of like square, stocky dogs anymore. And then their mentality, the lack of courage, the lack of drive, the lack of heart. It's a completely different breed than the working line dog, right? And that's fundamentally it. Josh says non-committed, flaky club members can turn off leaders so they don't give new folks the benefit of the doubt. Well, I think, Josh, that's a problem with expectation, right? Like, why should you expect everyone that joins your club to be serious? I wouldn't expect that. Like, there's like really, when you look at the human population, it's like if you're lucky, maybe 10% of people have the motivation to do anything like significant in this life, in anything, right? Maybe 10% at the I'd probably more like 5, to be quite honest with you. I would expect the vast majority of club members to just kind of be there to have a good time and maybe scrape by a title once in a blue moon. And I'm just going to treat them appropriately. I'm like, all right, that's what you want. That's fine. We're going to give you that experience and we're going to make sure that your membership and your fees benefit the club as a whole. But I'm also going to make sure that I have that competitive group as well. And that competitive group is going to be treated appropriately because we need them, right? It's kind of like a gym. The best way to explain it is like a gym. So, like, MMA gym. My buddy Lucas, who Mike was just making fun of, for instance, my buddy Lucas, he has an MMA gym and they run, rec training. Like, I go there and I do boxing with him, like there's like a lot of people that are not professional fighters involved in that. But then he has, a group of amateur and professional fighters that train all together. They have their own group, they have their own times, they have their own coaches, right? And they have their own kind of time in the club, right? In the gym. But he needs them because what they do is they bring more authority to the gym so that people with like their kids will sign their kids up for jujitsu, or that, someone like me who says like, listen, like I'm not gonna ever do anything professionally, but I would like to, become proficient with my hands, right? I'll go there because he has professional fighters and they clearly, he clearly knows what he's doing, right? It's not like a McDojo situation, right? I think dog clubs should kind of take on more of that idea. You think I should open a location in Illinois? Well, if I could clone myself, maybe I would. What would my advice be to someone that wants to get into the sport? I'm from the Netherlands. So many clubs seem so secretive and hard to get into. Well, you have two problems in the Netherlands. Number one, if you have like a club, there's going to be two clubs. There's going to be club number one that is just going to really suck at everything. And it's going to be like this kind of combination of cookie feeding and ball bribing and, you know, uh, rainbows and lollipops and cool stories that lead to absolutely nowhere, right? Because remember, in the Netherlands, it's illegal to train in the right way anymore. And then the clubs that are like, hey, like these guys get together and they actually go out there and they win, right? Or, they're competitive. Those guys are not going to be training with you because everything that they're doing is illegal and they don't want to incriminate themselves and they don't know you from Adam, right? And it's like that now increasingly more across Europe. And I think there's going to be a huge ripple effect from that all across Europe in the next 10 years. There's going to be a big price to pay for that because, places like Sweden, places like Austria, places like Germany, the top competitors, oh, they're heavy handed and they're doing all sorts of things that are illegal in those countries. And they cannot show you, new person who they don't know and don't trust. It's like, I'm not going to commit a crime with you, and that's the reality of what they're doing. And that's why you're going to see increasingly more and more North Americans beginning to dominate in Schutzhund. I plan to go and dominate at the Worlds this year. Don't be surprised if you see me on the podium with my buddy Ann Lee. And if you watch my content, you know why I say that. Christina says, I'm new to IGP. It's hard to get a club, so I will just stay with my trainer that just got picked for front end at nationals here in the States. Excellent. Nothing wrong with that. Sounds like somebody that knows what they're doing. What do I think is a better breed for home and family protection, Rottweilers or Pressas, and why? I mean, they're both a good roll of the dice. So pick whichever one you want. Um, Ty says great knowledge. Well, thank you. Drew says, just got a German Shepherd puppy. Having watched a lot of training content, yours has been the absolute best. You can tell just how well your dogs perform. Well, thank you, sir. Terrell says, thank you. Just bought your sport dog course. And this is the thing, right, guys? I'm a DIYer, like in some senses. I am not a DIYer when it comes to any kind of handyman work or mechanics or any of that kind of crap. I have no interest in it. I'll literally hire someone to do all that. But when it comes to dog training, I was always interested in doing it myself, which is why I had the benefit of, I would when I first got involved in this, there really wasn't a lot of online courses or content that you could get, right? But if you go on YouTube and you hunt hard enough, you're gonna find it all. It's all there. It was all scattered around. Now it's a lot more easy to find. You literally can go to, whatever big name trainer, and I'm sure they have like a whole bunch of online courses you can take, including myself, right? So now you can have a system that you follow, right? That now when you're going to the club, let's say you decide, okay, I'm going to be a member of a club, but these people really don't know what they're doing. I'm going to follow this system, but I'm still going to use their field and just kind of hang out with them because I like them, but I'm definitely not going to train like them. You can certainly do that. It's still not the same as actually it's better than not training with a professional, but nothing beats actually training with a professional that has a system that they follow that leads to tangible, successful results. Kendrick says, any tips on focused healing without food? I have the healing course. My dog isn't as food motivated versus the ball. Well, if you have the healing course, then follow what I do with the ball and you should be good to go. Tones the Savage said, hey, Hass, I'm teaching my 6-month-old dog focus heel. She doesn't have high food drive, so she's not luring. I would like to skip meals, but she looks underweight after one, and I don't want to stunt grow. I would say, how are you feeding the dog, right? Almost any dog will do something for food. And it's not just a question of starving them. It's, are you giving the dog the kibble like it's food, or are you making the dog believe that the kibble is prey? Right? I go into this in my Focus Heal course, right? I talk about how to make the food more exciting. So I would strongly suggest you consume that. Coal Creek Kennel says, I would be all for a bouncy house. Exactly. Make it a family atmosphere. Make it something where like, hey, they're having a Schutzhund trial down the road. I don't know what that is, but they have a bouncy castle. They got some food. They got some puppies. The kids are here. They're bored. Let's go. Make it like that. It's not hard, guys. Oh, we'll bring our Aussie with us. They got some dog toys we can buy. Maybe we'll get them a cool collar and a leash, and it'll be fun, right? Little miniature wolf stock or whatever. Have I personally seen high performing Dutch Shepherds? Yes, I have. Do I know any particular bloodlines? Not particularly, no. Rip says, I appreciated the segment on the pit bull on your reactive course. Curious if the owners had used your method to condition the dog or came to you after already introducing it. I'm not sure which of the pit bulls you're talking about, so I can't really speak to that. So I'm not sure which of the dogs you're talking about in the course. But suffice to say, any of the dogs that I showed in the course, I think in most cases had not trained with me previously unless I said that they had. Some of them, I think maybe, are you talking about the yellow dog? I think they may have had an online course. I'm not 100% though. Lori says, love the energy Has brings. Quick witted. Wow. Thank you, Lori. Punish. Cartier says, I wish. What happened to Punish Cartier? I wish I had found you before I got my Doberman, but she's only 5 months, so all is not lost. Started with Robert Cabral. Awesome. Let's see. Uh, Affectionate Boat Lake says, vid you did on German Shepherd versus Mel sound like you were saying Mel better. You just prefer GSD. Is GS not, man, the grammar here, my friend, is rough. Is GS not as smart, slower to learn? Alpine Canine said same as you about this. No, that is not at all what I said. That is not at all what I said. I said that you can get, I'll put it this way. If you take a top tier Malinois, hard to find by the way, and then you take a top tier German Shepherd and you put them against each other, the German Shepherd will win 3 out of 4 times. And you pick anything you want to do, right? Like police work, protection work, IGP, right? Even PSA. Like, no. Like, there's no comparison. What the Malinois offers is the perception that the dog has more drive. They don't actually, in general, have functionally more drive than the German Shepherd. What they have is a neurotic addiction to patterns, which make it appear as if they're more driven because they love doing the same thing over and over and over again. And that neuroticism, people often mistake for drive. It's not. It's just an addiction to following the same pattern over and over and over again. And that level of sensitivity that they have paired with the intensity, right? So they're sensitive and intense at the same time. You know, it's funny. There was a lot of people that got in their feelings about that video, as it was designed to do. So, I can't complain about it. Malinois, they're not sensitive. What Malinois have you been working? A lot more than you. I fucking guarantee you that, right? A lot more than you. I've been importing Malinois and Dutchies and herders for, I don't know, the last 10 years, right? And I don't just import them and sell them. I import them, I train them, and I sell them, right? So when you actually train a dog to a standard, you learn how they respond to stimulus, you learn how they respond to stress, environmental stimuli, social stimuli, all of this type of stuff. You learn more about a dog in like a couple weeks, more about that dog in a couple weeks than you'll learn in a lifetime just digging around in the backyard with your yellow dog, right? And I say that because it's always kind of amusing because, oh, what kind of Malinois have you? Buddy, stop. And then there's a lot of people also, they get worked up because they think that a Malinois, and Malinois are much more likely to come up the leash, by the way, right? They're much more likely to be handler aggressive. A lot of people mistake that for hardness. They mistake that for like, oh, this is like a tough dog. Like he's so strong. That's why he's fighting with the handler and he's coming up the leash. No, in many cases, that's a product of the sensitivity of the dog. That's a byproduct of the sensitivity of the dog. And he has two choices. He can flight, he can freeze, or he can fight. And he's choosing to fight right now. Maybe it's a learned behavior because he got away with some half-ass crap with a weak handler. In many cases, it's a weak handler, right? So he's learned, I get away with that, right? And so he offers that behavior more and more frequently. Remember how I said they love patterns, right? And it's not only the patterns that you like that they like. So, no, for me, it's not at all. I'll tell you what. The one thing I like about Malinois that they have that the German Shepherds don't have is they have that twitchy speed, right? Like they've got that little like twitchy behavior, and then they got that speed that comes along with that fast twitch. So it's like, I'll give you an example. Like almost every German Shepherd I've worked with, you have to fight with them for that fast sit in motion. Every Malinois I've worked with, I train exactly the same way. They all have a freaking speedy sit in motion. They have rocket dumbbell retrieves in and out, right? So they have that like speed, right? It's just the way that they're built, the way that they think, the way that they move, so on and so forth. German Shepherd with the same level of drive isn't going to move as fast as that Malinois. But the German Shepherds in almost all cases have more hardness. They're more resilient to stress, both from internally and externally, right? And for me, I'm not willing to sacrifice that for a dog that offers a little more trainability. And I say trainability in the sense that it's like, The Malinois is great if you kind of know what you're doing, but maybe you don't have like an expert level of training. And I know I'm pissing off a lot of people right now, but like it's great for those people that are kind of like mid-level trainers because like it'll kind of like increase your confidence and you'll be like, man, like, look, like he's awesome, I'm awesome, and blah, blah, blah. Right. Whereas with the German Shepherd, like you'd be like, man, like this is not going well. You know what I mean? I'm talking again in terms of performance, right? In terms of optimized performance at the high level, not your basic pet obedience. That's whatever. Um, but like when you get to that high level of training, unless it's your preference to train Malinois over German Shepherds, you're going to train a German Shepherd because again, they're just fundamentally more solid dogs and it's more rewarding the outcome for me personally anyways in the end. The only reason I wouldn't get a Malinois is because the Malinois championship, nobody cares, right? I'm going to say that again because it's going to hurt some feelings. With a Malinois, I have two choices. I have FCI Worlds. Now, people care about the FCI Worlds. So, you can compete at the FCI Worlds. Um, but for me, it's not worth it to get a Malinois just to compete at the FCI Worlds because I can compete at the FCI Worlds with my German Shepherd because it's an all breed championship. The other competition they have is the FMBB. All right, I don't know what it even stands for. It's the Malinois only World Cup. But bro, like it's a hard competition to win, but nobody cares in the sense that you couldn't tell me, right? Probably who won last year. Whereas most anybody who even has a passing association with IGP knows who won the WUSD last year, right? Most people know who won the FCI Worlds last year, even, right? The FMBB, it's just there's not enough people that care about it. Um, Other than the Malinois people. And it's like the prestige of how hard you have to work for like that little prestige. At the end of the day, that's all we really get in IGP at the top level is prestige, and a cheap $25 trophy. And don't get me wrong, I like prestige, but they're like nobody really cares about the FMBB. No one really like follows it other than the Malinois people. Whereas the WSV and the FCI Worlds, it's like those are both obviously for WSV you can only compete with a German Shepherd, and for FCI Worlds, I can compete with either. But if I have a German Shepherd, I can compete also at the WSV. So why would I screw myself by getting a Malinois, not being able to compete at the WSV? I would say that the level of competition at the FCI and the WSV is generally comparable. I'm sure it kind of swings back and forth depending on the year, but the most famous trainers in the world, for the most part, when you think of them, they're generally German Shepherd people. All right, where are we? Have I taken any college courses on dogs or all self learn? There's no. I think there actually is nowadays. You can go to like a community college and take like a dog trainer course. I know the guy who's doing the one at, or he was anyways. There was like one at George Brown College here in Toronto. Buddy, that guy ain't gonna teach you anything. So I'm sure most of them are like that. Cody Briggs says, "Have always wanted a working line dog from you. Does the 6-month-old federal law apply to dogs being drove versus shipped?" I say to all my U.S. people, you guys come pick your puppy up. You'll be fine. We don't ship into the U.S. prior to 6 months, but if you want to come and pick your puppy up, that's fine. You can do that. All right. Does anyone else have anything good for me? Am I checking out on this one? What are my thoughts on the Canis panther? I'm sure it's a abortion of a mutt that has the requisite nerve and health issues that you would associate with something like that. Dustin says, with your new breeding program with Ann Lee, he's referring to Kennel Full Power, will you be breeding Chico? Stay tuned. Stay tuned. All right, guys. I don't think I'm seeing anything else. So I am going to wish you all a fantastic weekend. Stay safe out there. Is there a waiting list? There is no waiting list because I have not announced anything. No, I do not ship puppies to Australia. All right, guys, you have a fantastic weekend, and wishing you all the best. Thanks for coming out. See you on the next one.